All right, so now I guess we're sticking with the new business. So the next item is the preschool magnet lawsuit declaratory ruling. As you are aware, we won round one with regard to our contesting the need and ability or the requirement that we pay for the preschool magnet schools. I forward you all the declaratory ruling. As I said in the email, really, as it only pertains to us, it starts on page 22. Pretty straightforward. Just focusing on the statute and what the authority that the Board of Education has been given through legislature. But I just want to caution this a little bit is that this is, it's not a final decision. There are some steps that still need to have to go forward here. The first is that it's going to be presented to the State Board of Education. What this was a hearing officer that was selected mutually between our attorney as well as the State Board of Education, who came up with this decision. The next step is it has to go before the State Board of Education, and they have to either approve or deny accepting this decision. And once that happens, which we are told that that's on September 5th, and whether everything goes according to plan, and if it is accepted, then there's a 45-day appeal period that runs. So really nothing is necessarily final until, at the earliest, probably till the middle of October.
So we're paying right now then for the school year?
No, we are not. We if you remember, in the last budget, we have not included any items for the magnet schools in our budget. So the question does, to ask the question, well, who is paying, basically? That's a really good question because, going back as to how magnet schools in general are funded, if you remember what the statute says, it says that, districts shall be responsible to pay for these bills, or it may be deducted from ECS. Last year we did not pay our magnet school bills, and it was not deducted from our ECS. So what happens moving forward, I don't know. What these parents are being told, I don't know. But what the arbitration decision says is that it's not our town's responsibility for it. So there are some questions here that need to be worked out. And the other thing too, just to caution, is that our attorney, the last thing he noted when he sent this stuff over was that look out to see what the legislature and the governor does this year with regard to this particular issue. We may, this may have been a great decision, but in the end, there may be some changes that just eliminate all this stuff. So, I think it's a great decision for us. It's exactly what we've been saying all along. But the final, it's not final, number one. And number two, how it's all going to play out, there's still some question marks there. I'd asked Philip to kind of come up with some of the numbers of what it really means to us.
Last year we had 7 preschoolers attend the Reggio Magnet School in Avon. The bill was $26,180, of which we paid 0.
And then this year we assume approximately the same?
Well, there will be, yes, I would assume approximately the same. Obviously the pre-K kids move into first grade, kindergarten and first grade, but there are others that have indicated their enrollment.
3 so far. 3.
Is anybody sending a letter out to these parents notifying them of the uncertainty about potential uncertainty over funding? Is that something that should be done? At least the parents are aware that the Board of Education is...
I think that would be more of the responsibility of the Crep Magnet Schools.
You're right.
I think so too.
No, you're right.
They're
Keep out
choosing
of
to
it.
move.
Keep out of it. No.
Right.
Well spoken.
Do we have other kids in the magnet school above that we
Yes.
budgeted for?
We do not budget for any kids in any magnet school.
How many are?
So if you see it, it's about $3,800 per kid is what
last
we're
year
talking
we
about
had
here.
9 kids in the Reggio Magnet School and 1 child in the Montessori Magnet School, so that's a total of 10.
But that's not preschool.
That's why I separated it.
And we pay for that, right? We don't budget for it, but we pay for it.
Last year we paid 0 in all magnet school costs, as directed by this board.
Keep in mind, once again, is that we decided for all the this is funding of magnet schools in total, which is basically pay the bill or it may be deducted from the ECS. So this past year, not only did we not pay the bill, but we also never got it deducted from our ECS. So quite frankly, that's a win-win. And
But
that's.
can they deduct it later on? Is it like
My
a
guess
year?
is that
It won't
that
roll?
piece will come back to us in some form, but, you know, you directed me not to pay those bills, so
Okay.
I haven't paid them. And they've been coming every month, or up until the lawsuit.
So, I mean, it really puts a burden on the State Department of Education to, you know, they would have to go ahead and make the affirmative step to do so. Last year, they did not. There was a good question of whether they would actually do so, you know, kind of put it to them a little bit, let them figure it out. And it's something, honestly, you know, Steve Tuxbury, once again, is not here tonight, I think from one of the very first meetings I attended, almost, you know, however long ago that was, he was saying all along, why are they sending us money and then we send it back to them? It really doesn't make any sense. Why do that? And the statute doesn't require us to, so why would we even bother doing that anyway? It's something we have no control over, it's not something we plan for, it's not something we don't educate these children, and, you know, so if it's gonna come, you know, through other sources, so.
I might add, however, that your board chair was adamant in the superintendent of schools last year at this time, researching other districts, what they were doing, and I think it was that research that he really pushed me to do, got everybody interested and engaged. Now, Region 10 took the lead, but I think they took the lead because of, frankly, a lot of the pushing that Brian provided. And Brian was a part of all the conference calls and all the emails that were going back and forth. So you really, you know, there was some punch behind the words, and he really was responsible.
But I also think our superintendent also nudged
Oh,
to get this issue
absolutely.
too, so, I mean,
really
I
attribute
give
this
credit
to
to
Brian,
both
to
of
be
you.
honest with you.
Well, whatever, it's a joint effort, and obviously when you have a board who's, you know, we made a decision as a
Support it.
board, so we move forward on it. So, I think it's a great result, but I just wanna make sure people were aware of, because one thing you don't hear reported is they think it's a final thing, and there's still some things that can go forward that may make this not a final decision.
Can you just clarify, because I'm sorry, I'm
That's
still
fine.
learning about all this stuff. You say we're given the money, so say a student enrolled in magnet school cost $1,000. We're given the $1,000 and then we pay the $1,000, it's a
No.
wash?
It's not a wash,
It's a
no.
percentage? Is it?
Every child, there's a very complex formula
Okay.
for arriving at your ECS funding.
Right.
Every municipality has that.
Yeah.
In part, it's based on student count. So whether a kid goes to Reggio Magnet or New Hartford Elementary School,
Okay.
that kid is associated with an amount of money.
Oh, so you mean that,
So
okay.
theoretically, that's why they say you either pay the
You're
bill up
getting
front or we'll deduct it from your ECS
Oh,
funding.
okay. I thought this was like an additional, like that, very clear, thank you.
But the part of the statute that I was focused on was it says they may deduct it. It wasn't we shall or will, it was may. And this past year, they didn't. So, you know, things can change, but I think that was a win for us last year. And I don't think there's any reason to change what we're doing as a result.
Unless you tell me
That
otherwise.
stands.
Okay.
Okay. Next item is under new business, is the air handler project.
So this has been one of those projects that has been somewhere in your vision for some long-term upgrades. It originally came from a 2007 report when mechanical inspections were done at each of the three buildings, and it identified the replacement, I believe at that time, of 4 air handlers. There really are 6 air handlers, and they're at various levels of age and condition, and so when we initially put this project out to bid, we had no bidders. And I've been working with Silver and Petrocelli to describe the bid, or you know, to actually give some meat to the bid so that prospective bidders would be able to bid a project and know more about it and understand what it would entail. And then I've worked with Silver and Petrocelli to try to get people involved, contractors, to come up and take a look at what we have and then follow up with a second bid. So we were able to, in the work with Silver and Petrocelli, I was able to, we walked through the building extensively with, I think it was 3 or 4 different contractors from around the Waterbury area. And we actually were in the rafters and above ceilings, trying to get a scope of this project. Silver and Petrocelli's engineer put out a scope for this project that was very simplified, because it became very clear to me as we began looking at this that the notion of air handling works in tandem, obviously, with your heating system, and that you could really expand the scope of your controls so that they're interoperating. And in our older buildings, they're not interoperating, they're separate units, heating, ventilation. So, so we did our best job, or the engineer did his best job to rescope this project, to leave the air handling piece as a separate entity, and we had one bidder for that spec. And if at some point, if this board wants to take a look at his specs, I have them. You could look, this is the air handling project, and there's lots of information in here regarding the specs that the engineer created. So we had one bidder, and obviously that far exceeds the amount of money that this board budgeted. And I think, as I reported to the board when we met for an update, along with this Director of Student Service interview on the agenda was an update, I indicated that clearly when it rises into this amount of money, it's getting into a capital project and perhaps could be wrapped into a building project, when a building committee could objectively look at the heating system and the air handling system and whether or not we do want to make them work together, and some of the potential and possibilities for energy savings and additional cost savings for the future of the school.
I seem to recall back, I can't even remember how many years ago, but when you did have, I believe, the consulting engineers in, this was at Antonini, maybe 4 years ago.
When we're talking about the new roof.
Right, the new roof, and then it was also, I mean, there was very much this issue of the interconnectedness of all of these projects, including the replacement of the boilers, the choices, how much, you know, if you upgrade the windows and the doors and other things, it could, in effect, impact the size of the other mechanicals to go into the heating and ventilating system.
So the fact that we have more energy efficient windows and doors will really impact what we need for air handling as well.
Yeah.
You know, while we have done a pretty good job, I think, taking these projects separately and kind of knocking them off one year at a time, Dan alluded to that even tonight, I think you've come to the time where you really have to look at that school as a whole now and address as one piece and not as individual pieces. Because your superintendent of schools does not have the energy, I have the energy, I don't have the education to really report to you objectively and knowledgeably what you should do or what I would recommend. We need professionals to take a look at the whole building, and I think it would really should fall under a capital project that Dana also alluded to tonight.
That is something we're going to talk about a little later, but it is right. The time is right for us to be pursuing that. We've gone forward multiple times with the windows and doors, and we're told that should become a larger building committee, which was fine. We're patient. The last payment of Bakerville is next month, so now is the time to get this off the ground. So that's something we're going to get to a little later. I want to talk about, but now's the time to get on this stuff. And you do get to these circumstances where you can't necessarily break apart separate pieces anymore, or it doesn't make sense to. It doesn't become cost efficient anymore. You try to do one thing without doing the other, because they are interrelated.
And don't we also have a roofing? A lot of these mechanicals sit upon the
Exactly.
roof.
He talked about that too, and there's
So
options
there's-
because of that to put on top of the roof.
Yeah,
And
and
if
solar, we could
Oh, yeah.
re-examine again.
We can look at the grants that are available, isn't it?
Well, one thing I just want to point out too is that, when you look at some of these numbers, there's always a concern of mine, which is they're dated when we were working with them. The numbers we had for the air handlers went back, I believe, 2007. I'm correct. Here we are in 2012, and it just, you look at this stuff, it's like, well, what were they even looking at the time as compared to what we're looking at right now? It's a really hard thing to get your hands about unless you get an engineer to come in every year with a brand new number on it, a new take on it. You know, you're dealing with dated information. So that's true with all these numbers with our capital stuff. So, and they're all over the place, and it's hard to pin down when you're making requests. Because some people may come back and say, well, you completely underestimated that. Well, we're working with what we have, you know, and it's old information. We made that clear to everyone at the time, so I just want to make that point known.
Is this number affected by asbestos?
You know, I was trying to
Area
dig,
or-
I can't answer that accurately. I do not think so, because there was some debate between Marty, the engineer at Silver and Petrozelli, and me, and then the particular contractors, whether that was included. And I kept saying it would be the responsibility of the town to remediate that problem. And what it would be is the elbows in
Right.
just a select small group. And I was thinking, and this was, 6 weeks ago, thinking that we could kind of tie everything up together. When we did the abatement for the floors, maybe we could do, so that's why I said to him, just don't even worry about that. The board, we'll keep that as a separate entity. So I do not believe it includes asbestos, and to the best of my ability in reading the bid documents, it's not.
So was there any
So it would be additional
communication
money,
on
no.
why this number is so, I mean, I get that the years have changed, but this number is a lot different than the one years ago.
Because the other one was just
It was
Your
general.
handlers.
So we're not even
just
talking,
generic.
we're
I
talking
think you're
apples and
talking-
oranges,
I think you
completely
are.
different.
I think you are.
I mean, I just
I
need
think
to know that there's some sense.
And I also think,
regarding it.
I think that we thought there were 4, or the people who came in and did the capital study thought there were 4, or wrote 4 air handler
Right.
replacements, there are actually 6.
Oh, yeah, I
That makes a
remember
big
reading was
difference.
4. Oh, okay, so that makes a big.
But just, and I don't know the exact numbers here, just another example of this, is that same report that dealt with the roof. I believe they said it was 300,000 to do the roof, maybe it was
Yeah.
5. But then a couple years later, when we had an engineer look at it again, it went up to like, the cheap was like 1.2 million. So now you're looking at, that's just the type of things you're looking at, so.
But also one of the things that I was able to better understand, that with some slight modifications, maybe the existing dinosaurs could get going, with some change of belts, with some change in wiring, slight modifications. So I have asked a separate contractor to take a look at them to see what it would be to get at least some of them up and running for additional fresh air return. And that will come at a later meeting, right? That's under separate.
Yeah, I'd like to address it, at a later meeting is fine, but as long as it's not months. I mean, ventilators, air handlers, I mean, I just built my house 5 years ago and I got a whole study on HVAC system. If you don't have the whole process working, there's a flaw. And so, why do we need, if they're not working, why do we need them? Well, clearly you need them, and they're not working. So what is the effect? Is there bad air quality, or is it just bad efficiency in our systems, costing us more money because we're heating when we don't, or we're not heating?
Right.
I wanna know the effect, and I certainly wanna know the effect to the students.
I think you've just identified it.
But I wanna know, I don't wanna be, I built a house, that's my experience. I wanna know from somebody who does this for a living and said, you don't have these working, you are creating blah, or this is the result, or this is what's happening. You might not see it, but this is what's happening. I just think that we need to be more on top of the effects of what's happening with our building as a result of things not working.
Well, that's some stuff we can, I don't think you're gonna get too much of a different answer than what you just already provided, but that being said, I don't know enough about it, so that would be,
And frankly, this is what this board has debated since 2007 as we've taken a look at these projects. Because those questions have been put out on the table by other board members, Melissa. And some of these projects keep getting pushed away, and I think that has been the concern of previous boards. So that's why, and I remember the debate, if we change the windows, we have to make sure, and tighten the windows, we have to make sure that that air handling system is working. Steve Tuxbury has said that since 2007.
Then what do we need to do to move out of the hole we're in? I mean, if it's building department, building committee, or project, I will volunteer to participate.
Well,
I don't think I think it's Board of Finance.
well, no, I think what
There.
we need to do is to move forward with the Board of Selectmen requesting that the board, they come up with a building committee, which we've asked in the past and was denied. And the whole reason was, you know, the rationale was because they were paying on Bakerville and didn't want to start another project until this one was paid for, but now it's being paid for. So now is the time, and these are legitimate things to include, this is what we'd like to get done. And I don't know all the details beyond that, but it probably would be multiple members from different, our board, Board of Selectmen, Board of
The
Finance.
existing capital committee.
You know, some outside people who have some expertise, who've dealt with the wastewater treatment plants, and other people with more construction experience that certainly I have. You know, try to get this off the ground.
It will not be the Board of Ed.
Yeah, well, not,
It can't be.
it's not exclusively the Board of Ed, no, but our
But there will be
participation.
representation.
But you're right, I mean, to get some of these things out there and, you know, try to get them done, because we have been piecemealing it, and, you know, it's just, it's not, we're at the point we can't really do that anymore.
I agree.
Do we have monies, or does somebody or other parts of the town, if we're going to bring in some consulting engineers or people to advise us, as we say, we need some expertise here, do we know where the funding for such services are?
Typically, when a Board of Selectmen or select people create a building committee, they also
Create a budget,
provide
a
a sum
budget.
of money for
Okay.
that, and it would not come out of the,
Okay.
either our capital or our operation budget. That's typical in my knowledge, in my past.
And it might be something we could ask, I mean, from my view, ask the Board of Finance to pay for this year out of fund surplus that we have in town, to get that going, but instead of budgeting it for next year, because that means if you start budgeting for next year, then you're not.
And then we're
Right.
delaying a whole
Now
year.
it's delayed even further,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions with regard to that? All right, so now we're gonna move
All the way back up.
all the way back up to the superintendent's report.
Well, I'm sorry, so does that mean we're going to request for a building committee, are we gonna move forward with that, or?
Well, I wanna talk about that a little later.
Okay, that's
'cause-
cool, I just wanna make
but-
sure that there's a,
Yeah, well, we have to decide how we wanna do it, but
okay,
there's a
that's cool.
section later I was gonna get to that further, so.
So, under my report, enrollment, we have an enrollment now, and I'm telling you, this changes
The
daily.
enrollment.
568 students. Would you like the breakdown?
Yes.
Yes.
Kindergarten, 7D.
Oh, they went
Oh,
up
you went up
too.
to?
We went up,
What
but
did you
we've
say?
been,
Seven?
we went up even further, but we went back down again.
70? Oh, that's still low though.
7-0. It
It
was
was
68 last
Yeah.
week.
Oh,
Grade 1, 73. Grade 2, 69, as of today. Grade 3, 79 plus 1. We have a child who is ours. We're the nexus, we're the responsible district, but the child is educated by an outside source.
So 79 in our building?
79 in grade 3, yeah,
Okay.
yes, in our building. 84 in grade 4, 94 in grade 5, and 89 in grade 6.
I'm sorry, can you repeat 5 again?
Grade 5 is 94,
And 6?
89. So you really can see a pattern here, can't you? You know, as we exit those higher 80, low 90s, even mid 90s, we're only getting in low 70s. And it's been consistent now, hasn't it? 3 years in a row, 69, 73, 70. All right?
and some of these other numbers went up, were higher because we had people move into the town.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was
And Melissa,
Not
if
really
I had to
didn't
state
start
my,
that way.
I couldn't state anything
Yeah.
on those numbers remaining that way tomorrow. Those were this afternoon.
Certainly by the first day of school, you may have some other,
They come out.
Believe me, and as a former principal, I can remember for the first 5 or 10 days of school, having a handful of kids that you never see, but their parents just haven't re-enrolled them yet into a receiving school, another receiving school, so you don't get notification of that. So that's why, by the way, the state does the October 1 count. They wait till October to do it, they don't do it in September.
Is there any word on the change for the start date for kids? I know the state
No.
had talked about it as
No.
October 1.
No. All right, and remind you, tomorrow night, 6 p.m., the Region 7 District meeting. I know some of you are unable to attend. It will be recorded. Actually, Brian asked me to ask the Region 7 Superintendent, Judy Palmer, and Judy indicated that Maria Moore is typically there and probably will be recording it.
Yes, yes.
Where is the little field?
Yeah, good question.
Good question.
Is it
There'll be
in-
directions when you come to the main door. It's hard.
Is
Yeah.
it in?
It's a
the-
maze
You
whenever I
feel
go
like
in
you're
there,
going
it's a maze.
wherever.
Which
I
building's
never
gonna
has the
be empty?
cafeteria and
high
down to
school
the right
building?
and left.
The high school,
The high school
main
building?
entrance.
Okay.
Alright, and then the
And
last
never
thing, it's
take
not
it
on the
away.
agenda, or it's not as, that I was going to report this, but, I did receive notification that we will receive, already have received the REAP grant that was anticipated, the amount this year, and that in part is based on student enrollment, is $47,907. $47,907.
And how's that compared to last year?
A little bit more.
Yeah.
And that's more than what we have anticipated in the budget.
Correct.
That's a nice surprise.
Small amount.
Yeah.
Hey, because every little bit counts.
You bet, especially as we're doing our common curriculum, common core curriculum.
Were you gonna notify us about one other item? Did you say something
The
about?
FMLA,
Yeah, 30 weeks?
that comes under,
Oh, okay.
under personnel. I'll just do that under
All right.
personnel.
We have no building report. I think the plan is that our administrators will be here in the September, first September meeting.
Yep,
Give us the building report.
we have a schedule, there will be an administrator at every meeting. A building.
Next items are routine business, the approval of minutes. We'll start with the June 19th meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes of June 19th, 2012.
Second.
Motion by Katie, second by Sue. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, this, we have Katie, Sue, right?
Yes.
Elaine, Melissa, Josh, myself, opposed, abstained, and one abstention. You got that, Jan?
I got
Okay,
it.
great. Next item is the August sixth, 2012 special meeting.
I vote to approve the minutes for the August sixth, 2012 meeting.
Motion by Jen,
Second.
second by Elaine. Any discussion? All those in favor? We have Jen, Katie, Elaine, Melissa, and me. I think we're all who's there. Opposed? Abstained? And Sue and Josh abstained. Okay, personnel report?
Teacher hirings, Michael Searson at a B15 level 1, step 1 I mean. Michael is a graduate of St. Andrews College and then is currently doing graduate work in the area, St. Joe's. And then Megan McGray, who was Sarah Gaedecke's long-term sub for 75–80% of last year, is appointed to a grade 6 position. As indicated, you got a copy of their resumes. Megan has been placed on B2. I gave her the 1-year experience. Our Director of Student Services, as you all know, Angela Aaronworth, has been appointed our new director. She comes from Windsor, exclusively from Windsor. She was both a special education teacher and a special education supervisor. And I appreciate the help that Maria gave me and Elaine gave me in the interview process for that.
I just want to make just a quick comment about sort of the need for that meeting that we had. That was kind of short notice for everyone. Angela had a provision that she needed to give 30 days notice before she could start with us. So when the time came, it was imperative with schedule to do it as quickly as possible so she could give that notice. Because as we stand right now, she's still not going to be with us for the first day of school. So if we were looking at the schedules, if we waited another week, or if there was more time involved to make it happen, it just would have pushed back her start date. And the focus was to get it done as quickly as possible because of that.
Her start date is September 6th, so we'll be without her the first week of school. For kids, she is coming to the convocation so that she can do some orientation with her own staff, her new staff. She wants to meet them, obviously. All right. And then the last thing is, well, not the last thing, Cynthia Lefebvre has announced her tutor retirement. We do not have a replacement for her at this time. And then the real last thing is the FMLA leave notification by Monica Underwood. Monica is expecting a child in October and plans to take the full 12-week leave, FMLA leave. Typically for a maternity leave, 6 weeks of it can be used. The employee can use their accrued sick leave, as in the past. That's what we have done. And then the second 6 weeks, when the woman moves beyond the stage where she is impaired, is she can take FMLA leave, but she does not get paid. And I always am very awkward about how to phrase that, but
You did good.
you know,
You
for
did
6
fine.
weeks she's sick,
You
for
did
6
fine.
weeks she's fine.
Yeah.
God willing, everything goes well in the delivery and the birth. So
Now, do you think there's gonna be any request to extend that
I do
further
not.
for the year?
I do
Okay.
not. However, we have a second teacher who is pregnant, and I don't know at this point. I think her intent is not to return to ask you for a child rearing leave, but I'm not sure on that. I don't have it in my email. Okay.
Would they coincide or be different?
Well, they're going to be different, but they're not going to overlap. There may be a small window of overlapping, so we don't know for sure yet. Obviously, I'd like to hire one sub
Sub
and
to
move
cover
it
both.
from grade 3 to grade 5, and you know, but I'm not sure that's going to work. We're looking at that. All right.
Okay.
That's it.
The next item is the financial report from last year.
So,
Something we haven't
You've
done.
got three financial reports. The final financial statement for 11/12. This is again my internal document. It's what I use, but the numbers are correct, and those are the numbers that I will be using next week when I do the ED 001, which is the final audited budget report. Questions?
Pretty damn close. You speak up, you speak up.
Well, given the unanticipated costs, you know, and some of the costs that I did approve, and we've talked about this, but given a lot of those unanticipated costs, you look at sped transportation and sped outplacements and sped, additional sped costs.
We had the Angelini emergency shelter.
You look at the Blue Cross and Medical, we had 6 changes in our during open enrollment, which is done after the budget. So whether it's a marriage, whether it's a birth, whether it's, you know, all the other options for changes. So people that move from the high deductible plan to the Blue Cross plan, which would be a greater cost for us. So, you know, those are all unanticipated things, and we don't budget extra. And you know, every year I talk to you about that. So that's where we stand. You'll notice, and we'll talk more about this, the cafeteria shortfall. We did take budgeted monies from this operation account to as we have done in the past, to place in our revolving account for cafeteria.
Can you explain that? You said it's not the Board of Ed, but it's not on a budget?
We don't
Cafeteria
budget it.
account?
Right.
Okay, we don't, okay, we
So
don't
it's
plan for it.
it's an unfunded potential liability.
Okay.
Some years, and there've only been
There's
one in
money.
my
Right.
tenure, where we didn't have to take any money from the operational budget. And if we didn't have any money in the operational budget, we would have had to go and ask the Board of Finance for money so that
Okay.
it was funded.
Where does the account sit? It's in a town account though?
It's a separate revolving account, and we have complete jurisdiction as a Board of Ed, and Pat Housen operates that account as she does this one.
Okay.
And physically, the town, you signed a check for $18,000 that was then placed into the cafeteria account.
So we're actually moving the funds from,
Physically moving the funds
Physically
from
moving
one.
funds. It's
And
not a
that's
book
why,
entry.
I'll explain why I didn't do why, when we get to the
right,
cafeteria
yeah, I
account.
had a question on that,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And what, the certified salaries, why is it short there? But then I saw in special education as high, is it because
And
of that?
this is what we talked about during budget, and we tried to present this to the town, and explain it. You had personnel changes, you had, after the budget was approved, we made some changes to
Oh, yeah.
positions. We added positions back in, and so that's why it's close to being balanced
Yeah.
with the sped. See how we
I keep forgetting
end
the
up.
budget approval time was
Right.
up, okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay.
And hopefully this year, I mean, I think we did a really good job trying to, with that last meeting, to finalize our budget right before the vote, because in the past, we hadn't really made those changes, so, you know, this year, we shouldn't see that kind of differences. But it was based off of personnel changes that were made, but we didn't have any of that this year, so, I think it's gonna look better.
I hope so, just again, when you're in an operational budget, there are decisions that I make day to day that will change that. I will approve additional hours for a secretary because there's a new principal in the building, or they need some more time in the summertime to work together, as I did last year. That's one of the reasons why. I approved Linda as our data management coordinator, spending a little extra time because we were making transitions in the ability for us to do lunches online, to do various online activities, to upgrade Power School, or all those things that we're doing. And frankly, when you do the budget, you don't know all those costs. So the bottom line, as Katie said, we're giving back money to the town. A small amount, but we are giving back $9.17.
I love it.
And that is really based on the time frame of bills coming in, trying to get it lower and lower and lower.
Yep. My memory might not serve me right, but this year, we kept carrying a red figure through the year because of payments we made to, the retiring principal at Antolini.
Right.
And we had a payout.
Right.
Are we gonna do that?
You will see the
Okay.
red figure in
Okay.
your first 2012-13
That will be
for the
Steve's.
principal and the 2 teachers who announced their retirement. And it was a
Oh, right.
large sum of money.
Yeah, okay.
And that money is being carried by our new budget, but and I will show you, I will ask you to make a line item transfer because we saved a significant amount of money in these new teacher hirings. So it is covered.
Yeah.
The cost for those payouts to the retirees is covered by the savings in the new teacher hires.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I know all about that.
And as of the next teacher's contract, the one that
They
will
have to
be in
now
effect,
notify
they
us.
have to notify us by
February
February 1st.
So we
In
theoretically
order to
should.
get their payout at
In
the
the
end of the year,
budget.
otherwise it's deferred and we can stick it in the budget.
For the following
For the
year, so
following
they would
year.
lose 12
Yeah.
months of
Yeah.
this fee.
Good,
So,
good.
so as of this next year,
We shouldn't incur that problem again.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay? I do need
So-
approval of that one.
Okay.
What, you explain that, what are we actually proving?
Just this last
That we
thing.
agree with this paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we
Is that
like
just a-
giving
You've seen
town
it?
back
Technicality?
$109.17?
No, I mean, we have to, for audit purposes, we have to approve the final for last year.
That we
Final
close
financial
out, so,
statement. We
okay,
close
so
out,
it's
we're sending
literally-
109.17 to the town.
Okay, alright. Just wanna make sure I understand what
So you need a
our
motion?
process is.
Make a motion that we approve a financial statement for 2011-2012 school year,
Could you just put dated 8/15/2012?
dated 8/15/2012, as
Second.
presented.
Second.
Motion by Sue, second by Elaine. Any discussion? All those in favor?
You know,
This will be unanimous.
you know this will be audited. This is all part of the regular town audit. Okay, and the last one is the second one is the cafeteria account. So you saw the $18,000 withdrawn from here. You see the $18,000 put into the cafeteria account as an offset for its deficit. Now, one of the things that I wanted to note, and I didn't do, we did Education Connection, Christine wasn't here. Obviously, we're all concerned about this deficit. Repeatedly, we've discussed this a lot. After our last meeting, I think I indicated to you even that I was going to request that they negate, that's the right word, the last quarterly
Waive.
payment. Waive the last, that's a better word. Waive the last quarterly payment of our annual fee to Education Connection for running our program, based on the fact that they have to have some skin in this game, I believe. That it can't be just the Board of Education. We hire them to run our show, and if they're running it into the hole every year, they need some skin in the game. So I broached Christine. Christine forwarded me to her supervisor, and her supervisor forwarded me to the Director of Education Connection. It all took longer time than I wanted it to, but it was, you know, multiple weeks. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. We finally got the Director of Education Connection to waive our final payment, which is, as indicated, $6,559.14, which left us with a balance of $69.72.27 in our account, because, as Melissa asked, the physical check had already been moved. You can't move it back again unless I gave it to the town. I didn't do that.
No.
So,